Police are building their case against the suspect in the murder of United HealthCare's CEO. Authorities saying the gun found on Luigi Mangioni's matches the shell casings found at the scene of the crime. Meanwhile, a police intelligence report obtained by CNN giving a warning about online posts cheering on the killing. Quote, "This rhetoric may signal an elevated threat facing executives in the near term, with the shooting itself having the capability to inspire a variety of extremists and grievance-driven malicious actors to violence." Keith Wojcieszek is Global Head of Threat Intelligence at Kroll, and he joins us now. Keith, we'll come to that point and perhaps the risk of copycats, but I just want to ask you, what kind of increase in activity and requests have you seen from companies since the killing took place?
Julia, thank you very much for having me today. In the past week or so, we've seen approximately about 200% increase in requests of physical protection and looking towards different types of intelligence to see, if there's a threat out there for some of these executives.
And is it specifically in the healthcare industry, or is it all industries? And I guess to that point is your advice for all industries that they need to be analysing the threats posed to their executives at this moment?
That's a wonderful question because it is not just healthcare. It is every industry. Every industry that is out there has been contacted us to see, where do we sit? What are we doing to mitigate some of these potential threats? I think when you talked earlier, talked about online chatter, social media, and different types of intelligence we can collect to order to assess what that risk is. That's what they're looking for, because when it comes down to it, the intelligence that you derived before really predicts how the threat is going to accumulate, and then what you need to do to mitigate.
You're saying that a digital footprint for a company and personal digital footprints for individuals makes this problem that much more difficult, because it's not just arguably a physical threat that we're talking about here. It's also cyber threat. Surely too. I mean, understanding what your vulnerabilities are is crucial to providing better protection.
No, you're exactly right. Understanding your vulnerabilities, where those gaps are, and your exposure, right? And looking at this, it may not be the CEO, it may not be the executives. It could be their children, it could be their family members that are posting information that could be harm to them. So understanding where those gaps are and mitigating them the best you can is extremely important. We're seeing a rise in all of this. Even you had said historically, talking about even something little as swatting, where it used to be, they call the emergency services to come to a house, and saying that faking is it's a terrible thing that they do, but these criminals are doing that just to see the response. So we're seeing all types of different attacks. It doesn't always have to be physical. So it derives and starts with cybersecurity for sure.
I mean, companies at the epicenter of all sorts of risks, activism, geopolitics, personal grievances, as appears to be in this case as well. Keith, how do you analyse all the threats that are potentially posed and decide which ones are relevant and which ones you don't need to worry about so much? It's incredibly difficult for companies at this moment, I'm sure, to pour through all the threats that they face and decide what is pertinent and what isn't. And there's a risk that you miss the ones that are.
Yeah, it is difficult. That's the lie. With the help of technology today, and Kroll having that access to different automated intelligence is very helpful. But when it comes down to a specific threat, there's really three criteria you need to look at. One, is there a threat? Two, is that threat viable? And can the person that carried out the threat actually carry out the threat? And then thirdly is, can they travel? Can they move to this location? So as we're looking at that different types of characteristics of these threats, it helps us determine, what are viable threats and what is noise, because we do want to filter out noise. You don't want to, heighten an alert when it's not necessary. So, evaluating this and verifying it is extremely important and valuable in order for us to protect the individuals.
Do you have a sense of what proportion of companies, and maybe we narrow it down to big companies, have enough protection for their executives and their families, and what kind of money they're spending on this? Because I'm pretty conscious of the fact that it doesn't impact the bottom line and the financials. So if anybody's looking to save costs, perhaps this is somewhere where you strip costs from and you pull back on this, rather than perhaps leaving this as an essential part of a business.
Yeah, you're spot on there because when having to do an assessment and looking at costs to it, you have to weigh in and exactly, okay, how much do we want to spend on the protection? What is the real threat? And the costs really associate with the level of protection. Are you going to protect the individual? Are you going to protect the family members? What is the true risks? And then you look at the back end. How long has these threats been going on? And you had talked earlier about geopolitical. It isn't always about financial. So, looking at that geopolitical potential, there's so many variables that predict this and understand where those gaps exist so you can mitigate it. But again, it's a case by case basis, but ultimately it's determining, are those threats real and does that executive or individual feel safe?
Keith, very quickly, and it's very difficult to predict and to say and to go back in time, but would some kind of personal protection in this instance that we saw, just over a week ago, might that have saved Brian Thompson's life?
That's tough, right? And I can't really say either or. I don't have all the facts, but looking at the assessments, I think once you're gonna see once they come out with more information, maybe what if there was a solution, what that solution could have been. Now, again, we don't know the specific threats that happened, but looking back, you could see, okay, was there a telltale sign on this? Was it the little thing like was his movements posted prior, and if so, why were they? So
Yeah.
there's more information that needs to be collected before to make that decision.
Keith, good to chat to you. Keith Wojcieszek there. Good to chat.